Now, the UN's COP28 climate conference has formally launched a loss and damage fund long sought by vulnerable nations devastated by natural disasters linked to global warming. Many praise the development, and hundreds of millions of dollars has been pledged at the UN's COP28 talks on Thursday, but also warnings that much more is needed to help vulnerable nations. Many others have described the United Nations climate change as all talks and no action, while criticizing it for talking or taking the summit to a proto state. Some have accused the UAE team of planning to use climate talks ahead of COP28 to do oil and gas deals.
To adopt the draft decision contained in document FCCC/2023/L.1. Hearing no objections, it is so decided. I congratulate parties for this historic decision. This sends a positive signal of momentum to the world and to our work.
Now joining us on the news is Dr. Ambrose Igboke, Chairman, Guild of Public Affairs Analyst of Nigeria, Enugu State Chapter, to discuss this. Thank you so much, Dr. Ambrose, for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening to you too. Now, Dr. Ambrose, from your point of view, how significant would you say that the establishment of the Loss and Damage Fund and, to the new, talks is, and what impact would you say that we are to anticipate, as nations?
I'm an advocate. I have some extreme views when it comes to all talks about climate change, about the Kyoto protocols, about the COP meetings and all this stuff. For me, all African countries should not be involved in that. The European nations should not even be part of the Kyoto protocol. Because it is actually it's a European and American agenda. It is the agenda of the West. I mean, the West used fossil fuel, used coal, then they used logging of wood, used coal, and then used fossil fuel to drive their own technology up to where they have it. Even the aviation is still heavily rely on fossil fuel. And then, when the developing nations are beginning to, just rear their head towards development and trying to, exploit their own gas. I mean, exploitation of gas in Nigeria is not long ago. I think it's not up to even 80 years old. We have not even exploited gas for 100 years. America has got that they are exploiting that over 100 years. And then other European countries as well. And then all of a sudden, they develop new technology, and they're telling us about carbon emissions, about greenhouse depletion, all those kind of cliches. Why didn't they do it in their own time? So for me, all this talk about global warming, about cutting out greenhouse emission, about zero carbon emissions, all those talk should not be what the third world countries or developing countries are talking about. Developing countries need to develop their infrastructure. They need to develop their own economy through especially fossil fuel, in the use of especially the oil and gas, petroleum, crude oil. And that is what we are talking about. So when the West develop alternatives like they move from generating electricity through coal, we have thermal, which is gas now, and then we have hydro, and then they are developing into alternative energies like solar and some other wind energy and some other green energy. They want to force it down on the throat of developing countries that are coming up with all these, making it a talking point about all this. And so for them also to start blaming United Arab Emirates for trying to use the COP meeting for oil and gas deals, that is how they survive. That is their own natural resources. So Europe cannot use their own natural resources and use their own resources to develop their place over almost 4 centuries. And then it is time for Africa to develop. They are telling them about greenhouse emissions and all those stories. So I think strongly that developing countries like Nigeria should pull out of these climate change protocols and focus on developing their people, God-given resources, and then try to minimize pollution. Look at European countries that are here, even American countries like Mobil, Chevron, Shell, and all those people. They're the ones that spilled all the damaged all the environment in the Niger Delta in Nigeria. And they are here telling us about the degradation of the environment and the rest. So all these things that are against development in Africa, Africa should pull out. Africa should not just be like errand boys following all kinds of things that come up. And this is my very strong view about these climate change rhetorics that have characterized this kind of meetings for over the last 30 years.
All right, Dr. Ambrose, given that hundreds of millions of dollars have been pledged at COP28, do you think that this financial commitment is adequate enough to address the challenges faced by the vulnerable nations?
No, the vulnerable nations, you see, there are all these kind of developing nations, for example, which are the vulnerable nations like the third world countries, should not even contribute to that fund. They don't have any reason to contribute to that fund. It should be the people who have used fossil fuel to deplete the ozone layer, the people who have industrialized the world that have been using fossil fuel for more than 4-5 centuries. That should be the one. How many carbon emissions does Nigeria have? How many industries do we have here that we are going to donate money for vulnerable nations? So, not one country that vulnerable nations like Nigeria, in fact, what the African countries should not donate to that fund. It should be Europe, American, and those Western countries that have used fossil fuel over the years should donate to that. And then the major emissions, for example, China and some of these people that have the major emissions, are not even keen on those kind of things. Now, Europe and the West develop very expensive technologies. They are not even making it cheap. Solar is very expensive, and other alternatives they are bringing to us are very expensive. So, and then you are saying, we sell it to us very expensive, you make huge profits from it. From the profits you have made, you give us change and say that that they are funding, they are doing donations. I think African leaders should wake up and stop attending all these talk shows. It's disgraceful.
We do know that there have also been concerns about the COP28 being hosted in a petro state, with accusations against the UAE team for potential oil and gas deals. And this raises question about the summit's impact on the credibility of global climate discussions. What is your thoughts on that?
One of the reasons I think the move is there is to have a hope to say that one of the greatest, according to them, fossil emissions and carbon emissions in the world that is causing global warming and all those things is from crude oil. So exploited in especially by Middle East countries and some African countries like Nigeria, Angola, and the rest, and then some of the South American countries like Brazil, Venezuela, and some other those people. Now, those people have the crude oil. And so I think the thinking is when you move it to the one of the capital of OPEC nations, and then you can now start, singing that kind of theme that it will help to douse it. But again, I give kudos to the UAE guys. If they see it as a deal to negotiate oil and gas deals, very good for them. Let them do business out of it, because they also know that if they are trying to do these oil deals before the conference, and then they're using it as an opportunity, that goes to show the kind of mindset they have about the COP28, that is just talk shop. So they're going to use it for real business for the economy. I don't blame them, and nobody should blame them. If it was done in Europe, I mean, these things are psychophantic. I mean, when the oil companies, the biggest oil companies like Gazprom, is in Europe. The Mobil is still in the United States of America. Chevron is there. And so many other big entities. Eni is still in Italy. And Total is still in France. So what are we talking about? These are giants. These are the big five sisters, as they call them, that are exploiting oil all over the world. And that's what are we talking about? And then they are sponsoring their people to exploit oil, exploit gas. They are still building gas pipelines across Africa, transatlantic gas pipelines go through the Atlantic Ocean to supply them gas. They are still relying on gas for powering their homes, and they are talking about cutting emissions. I mean, these are contradictory and paradoxical. And so the world should not be wasting our time going for conferences that we know are two-edged sword that nobody is actually ready to commit to. Europe is not ready to commit to it. Essentially, the United States of America and the West. What they're interested in is develop alternative technology and sell it to what at an exorbitant price. Why they keep on doing their business. Imagine what happened last year when Gazprom of Russia refused to supply gas to Europe during the winter because of the Russia-Ukraine war. What did Germany do? Germany, that's a championing this course of carbon emission, cost of carbon emissions, went to their coal plants. They didn't destroy their coal plants. They had it as backup. They went to their coal plants and they activated it and used it to power their homes during the winter. So who is fooling who here? So they still have their coal plants. They didn't destroy their own. They're telling African countries and developing nations to abandon your oil and gas, abandon this, let's use clean energy. What made the other one clean? What made the other one not clean? I think African leaders should just stop all this gallery they go for and then see how they can develop their nations.
All right, Dr. Ambrose Igboke, Chairman, Guild of the Public Affairs Analyst of Nigeria, Enugu State Chapter. Thank you so much for joining us on the news.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure.